Yes, of course we started on time. That's par for the course. Okay, today is, well, I always say this show is going to be a little bit special. This one is going to be really special, I think. It's the first time that the atheists are going to put on the Christian hats and vice versa. The Christians are going to put on the atheist hat. Half this show is going to be us, like the title says, arguing, maybe not necessarily arguing for the opposition, but at least concessions. I'm all about concessions. That's why I don't like formal debates, because, well, really 2/3 of a formal debate is just reading off a piece of paper. That's not productive at all. The really only productive part of a formal debate is that cross-exam, and maybe the Q&A afterwards. Though that's the only productive part I like. If it could, so basically just think of this as a cross-exam minus the confrontational, hostile kind of maybe rhetoric that you might find in a formal debate. That being said, something else that's going to happen today a lot is that you're not going to find in a formal debate is the other side conceding. Because if you say, well, you have a good point, or I think I understand what you're trying to say, or steel manning the opposition, you're basically losing the debate. It's a popularity contest anyway. Okay, I'm rambling. So I'm going to bring on the guests one at a time. I'm going to start with Daniel Simon. And if you guys could, well, here we go. Daniel, welcome to the show. If you could tell us a little bit about yourself and where people can find you.
My name is Daniel Simon. I'm originally from Haiti. This is where you're probably hearing the accent from. You can find me on Twitter. I'm part of a few Facebook groups where I mostly interact and present my ideas. I got saved in the military back when I joined the Army in 1997, 98. And I've been an active Christian then. I didn't really get into the pro and con of theism probably about 12, back in 2000. Was it 2011 when I met Dr. John Ferreira, I think that's how you say his name. He was giving a presentation at one of the clubs I'm in, Philosopher Club, of Dallas, and that's where I met him. Then I got involved with different groups. So there's not much about me. I'm not a professional apologist. I don't have a blog that I'm trying to push or a book. I just like to present a more realistic version of Christianity. That's all.
Yeah, Dr. Ferrer is a great guy. I know him myself, and I like him immensely. Our other believer is James Walker. Welcome to the show, and tell us about yourself.
I am a former Mormon, now evangelical Christian. I work as president of Watchman Fellowship, an evangelical Christian apologetics ministry focusing primarily on interfaith evangelism. I write books, do videos. We have a weekly podcast, Apologetics Profile, and another one called Good Heavens. I'm also co-founder of the Atheist and Christian Book Club. We are a monthly gathering, as Jim well knows, as a charter member. We are a monthly gathering of believers and skeptics, respectfully discussing important books from both perspectives. So we will alternate. We will take an atheist book one month and a Christian book the next month. And we will gather primarily online ever since COVID on Zoom. We still do have some in-person meetings as well. But we will get together and respectfully discuss those. I'm committed the last 5 years to spend a good portion of my week reading hopefully some of the best atheist books and trying to deal with them. Listen to the arguments, understand them, as Jim was suggesting, steel manning rather than straw manning, and then respectfully discussing those. And those who are interested in that can visit our website, see past book clubs, watch those videos, or RSVP for our next book club, and that's at atheistchristianbookclub.com.
That book club, I've been delinquent for since the pandemic, but again, I promise
you are
James,
suspended. You're suspended, but I didn't want to break it to you right now online. But your membership is suspended, but you're not expelled.
Shoot. Okay, all right. I promise I know. I need to get back, but it's a great time, and I love how whenever you push the Atheist and Christian Book Club, you always emphasize the word respectfully discussing Christian and atheist books. I love that. Um, our first non-believer is Jena. Welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself.
Hi. No, I'm glad to be back actually, second time around, so that's good. Yes, my name is Jena Miyu. I am a atheist. I've been an atheist for I guess 4 years now. In my real life, I guess you could say I'm a nurse for about 10 years. But my activism online purely stems from being the co-owner of the Atheist Network group, also goes lovingly by Tang. So you can find us there at youtube.com/The Atheist Roundtable. I also host my own kind of solo show and stream and pre-recorded shows on that network, as well as work closely with other sister channels like Biddy Buddha and now known as Skeptic Haven. So, and I've of course done a lot of shows with the ACA as well. So, pretty much that explains me.
For those of you that don't know, the ACA is the Atheist Community of Austin.
Yes,
If atheism were Islam, then the ACA Austin would be Mecca in Saudi Arabia. That's it's basically the hub of all atheism, especially at least online. Our last but not least is Oz. There he is. Welcome to the show. Tell us about yourself.
What's up, everybody? My name is Oz, also co-owner of the Atheist Network group. And I was a Christian for, well, most of my life. About 5 years ago, I walked away from belief and religion. And I enjoy these conversations, and I think it's important that we can, when we can do it, be cordial and be respectful and dig into what we believe and why we believe it.
Awesome. Let's jump right into it. Now I got two windows up that I need to share, and I need to switch back to the other one. Okay. Tell me if you guys can see this. I'm just going to leave this up. I'm going to display it periodically. It won't be up the whole time, though. I want to get you guys talking as well. I'm going to fade into the background. I'm going to handle the live chat. I'm going to answer. I'm going to post questions on the screen. If you guys can find time to respond to the comments that you see on the screen or answer the questions, because you're going to see those pop up. Other than that, I'm going to stay quiet unless you guys have questions or comments on any of the things that I put on this chart, me personally. Other than that, I would like to start off the conversation with Oz. I'm looking at the best reason to believe. Now, I don't know you real well. We know each other, but this isn't a rip on you. Just you can tend to be sometimes a little bit confrontational, and just a little bit, just a tad. I'm wondering why you put none, and is there no way that you can concede? Okay, for instance, let me give you an example. I hate all Led Zeppelin music. I hate every album. I hate every song by Led Zeppelin. I don't hate them. I will not listen. I will switch the channel. I don't like listening to them. It's just not fun for me. That being said, Immigrant Song is the best of the Led Zeppelin songs. Doesn't mean I like Immigrant Song. It just means that's the best of everything Led Zeppelin has ever put out. You get what I'm saying? So Oz, can you answer that? And that's how we'll start off.
I do understand the comparison that you're trying to draw, but I would say there's a very distinct difference between hating a band and its music and the content that they put out and distribute, and trying to ground or zero in on a God claim, a deity claim that's convincing. And I think I've at this point heard all of them at nauseum, and I don't find any of them convincing as far as, oh, okay, that makes sense and gets us to a God. Whether we're talking about Yahweh or Allah or whatever, none of them even get close to convincing me or putting me back in that position.
If there's more than 3 seconds of dead air, I'm going to ask a question, and I have tons. So just so you guys know. Okay, that's 3 seconds. All right, James, you are really good at conceding. That's why I really enjoy. You're the most, I'm going to say it, you're the most intellectually honest Christian I know. Tell us why the problem of evil is the best reason to not believe.
Well, let me first of all comment on what I said for just a moment. And, I've spent more than the last 5 years trying my best to hear some of the best arguments against theism and trying to meet with people and hear directly from them, read the best books. I have not found any of the arguments against theism to be compelling enough to convert to atheism. At the same time, I find some of their arguments better than others, and I think a lot of the atheists at our book club will say the same thing. Where none of our arguments for the existence of God are compelling enough for them to convert to theism, but some of the arguments are more compelling than others. And to me, the most difficult argument to deal with as a Christian, if you're going to be honest with yourself, to me personally, is going to be the problem of evil. In a nutshell, how can a all-powerful, loving God allow evil to exist? Either he's not powerful enough to stop that evil, or he himself actually is evil, so he allows it to continue for that reason. And there's a lot of variations of the problem of evil, even complaints about or critiques of eternal punishment or hell is really just another variation of the problem of evil. This being an afterlife in eternal punishment would certainly be an evil, and so that's another version of the problem of evil. So I have ways that I have a theodicy or answers to that. There's Alvin Plantinga, the Notre Dame philosopher, has articulated some free will arguments or theodicies against the problem of evil, and I'm aware of many others as well. Some of which I think have merit, or some of which can certainly apply it to some of the evil, but maybe would not apply to all the evil that we see. So to me, the way I've tried to deal with it is I cannot, if I was able to solve the problem of evil, maybe I'd win the Nobel Prize or something, because no one's been able to do that. I do think that atheism itself also has a different kind of problem with evil than theists have. But nevertheless, theism still does have a problem with evil. And so to me, for my own personal satisfaction, I'm not expecting it to satisfy others, but I believe I have found a workable answer to one of the greatest problems of evil. And while I'm not able to successfully at this point apply that to every variation of evil across the universe, I would believe that it's possible that every problem of evil has a similar answer as well. So if anybody's interested, I can get into the more specifics on that. But by far, to me, this is the number one problem of Christianity, and that's the problem of evil.
If I can follow up on that, because you
Sure.
had expressed that there's a difference between atheists having a problem with evil versus a Christian. What is the difference?
Well, the discussions that we've had at our Atheist and Christian book club, and that I've had in other settings as well, deals with the problem of how do you quantify evil, and is there objective evil? Is evil just a personal preference? If there's an objective evil, who or what creates that standard? And so, those are the kind of conversation we have. What makes killing babies for fun evil? Is it simply because the majority of people in the latest surveys determine that? Is it because it's legal or illegal? Do you go by statute or law? Is that how you determine it? So is evil even real, or is it just a matter of personal preference? And that's a problem of evil. Once you separate it from some source or grounding, then you have to have that question at some point to answer what is evil and who gets to determine what is evil and what is good.
So
It's
to
also
clarify,
yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just wanting to clarify. So to clarify, it's basically whether or not your understanding of evil is grounded in something.
It's the grounding of it, and it's also how flexible it is. Over time, you can take almost any social issue, and what's considered to be good today was at one point in the past, even the very near past, the vast majority of people might consider it to be good. And perhaps today we can understand reasons why use of plastic straws might be considered to be immoral, but in a million years, you wouldn't have guessed that 25 or 50 years ago. So it's changing, it's fluid, and it begs the question: is there an objective good, an objective evil, or is it just a whimsical preference of the majority of people at any point in time?
James, do you prescribe to the omni traits?
Yeah. Yes.
So
Omniscience, omnipresence, omnipotence. Yes.
correct. Thank you. And so that's one of many, but that's one of my hangups with Yahweh. If we want to talk specifically about the God of the Bible, Yahweh being an omni trait God, but then there's still being evil, because if he's truly all knowing, all encompassing, everything, could he not have just made it to where he has his creation, forms it, so he has this companionship or whatever it is that he desires, without all of the hurting and the disease and the murdering and the slaying of children? And I mean, couldn't, if he's all
even you could add in animal suffering to that.
Sure. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Whatever it is, if he's all everything,
yeah.
Why cause and or allow such suffering and pain and torture? That's
that's a great articulation of the problem of evil. I couldn't have said it better myself. So, some of the theodicies or solutions to that Christians have looked at, why. One of the things is, in the best possible world, could God have merely created robots who had to do his will and go through the motions of worshiping him? Certainly, he's all powerful. He could have done that if he wanted to, but perhaps in the best possible world, you don't create robots that are programmed to do that, but you actually give them real free will, volition. You give them agency. And if you do, then that means they have a very real a choice that they could choose not to obey, not to follow. Then God, being a good God and not wanting evil, he could destroy all that evil immediately, or in the best possible world, perhaps he patiently redeems that evil and restores that evil and brings that evil into a relationship. So, the question that I have to ask, and I do ask today, is, if God is all powerful and good, should he destroy all evil? Okay, you check yes. You say, well, when should he destroy all evil? You might think, well, immediately he should have already done it. So why didn't he do it? So he should destroy all evil right now. Well, the problem is, if the biblical God says that all humans are sinners, me, you, everyone, we're all evil in his sight. So do we really want him to destroy all evil right this minute? Or would we rather wait for him to patiently restore and redeem those who are evil? And ultimately, I think that's what God's doing. So we would agree that the final position at the end of time is going to be a perfect world in which there's no evil, and that we are in relationship with God in a way that there's no more pain, suffering. But how do we get from where we are to where we want to be? And God wanting to restore, because he loves us, even though we are in rebellion to him. He has patiently created a way in which he can, over time, redeem millions of people who are in rebellion to him. And that, again, I'm not sure that's the answer, but that's one possible answer to why we see evil today. But let me just be honest with you, that is a possible answer. But let me say, when you look at evil, especially if you're looking at what we could call natural evil, not so much humans hurting humans, that could be explained maybe to some degree on the sinful nature of humans. But what about natural disasters? We could argue that the whole universe has fallen and as a result of sin. But again, it's a very difficult thing. So I don't want to just glibly say, oh, that answers the problem of evil, but it may get us on the right path to a possible answer.
So if, and maybe, because this might be a two-piece question. So maybe the first one, just a quick yes or no, and then I'll see if I want to ask the second one. But so on what you said, if I could try to encapsulate that, given that description as you just gave it, then are you stating that our current reality that we're experiencing, that this is the best case world that God could have created?
I think that's a difficult question to ask. I think maybe a better way of saying it would be that God is in the process of creating that best possible world. And the delay, or the reason why we feel that maybe justice is delayed or something like that, is God is lovingly in the process of redeeming millions rather than just destroying them as is.
But wouldn't he already? I mean, if he's Alpha and Omega, beginning end, why this drug out process? If he already knows the beginning from the end, what's the need in all of the evil? What's the need in all the murdering?
Well, again, the free will argument is that God, could he create a universe when in the Texas school shooting, that as soon as the gunman pulls the trigger, the bullet just harmlessly falls off and drops to the ground? He's all powerful. Sure, he could do that, but he has given us free will, and it's not free will limited to free of only what he wants us to do. So we can choose to sin. We do choose to sin. And even on horrific levels that boggles the mind, like the school shooting, it is a horrendous evil. And it's not inappropriate to ask those questions. Why does God allow that? And, what we see is he doesn't, in most cases, seem to create miracles to force someone not to sin. In other words, every time I tried to shoot you with a gun, the gun would fail to fire, or the bullet would fall harmlessly to the ground. He allows me to sin like that. And so, again, could he have created robots who didn't want to sin? Obviously, he could have. Or could he create miracles in which he suspends the law of physics to keep us from sinning? Obviously, he can. He doesn't choose to do that, perhaps because in the best possible world, he wants to give freedom. He doesn't want to create robots, but he does want to have time to and patience for those who will to repent, to turn from their sins, and to be redeemed and restored into a relationship with him. That's the basis of the Christian gospel, that no one is good enough to be right with God. So we can cluck our tongues and talk about how evil other people are. But the bottom line is me and you and everyone are evil when compared to a holy, righteous God. And so, God, if it's true that no evil can be in the presence of God, it's incumbent upon God to make a way that we can be redeemed, that our sins can be forgiven, and that we can be restored to fellowship with God. And that has been an event in history. It didn't happen, in the Old Testament. It wasn't fulfilled even with the cross and the resurrection. It's still going on right now. So God is in the process of redeeming the evil and eradicating the evil from the face of the earth. So we just have to be patient, as God is patient, and see that let that play out in history.
Well, I'll say it's not let the other get involved, so it's not. I'm not trying to dominate everything. You actually led into kind of what was going to be my last bullet point on that part, and that is, if for those that are believers, former believers, you understand, part of the omni traits is God is everywhere, all the time. And if sin and or evil, however you want to describe or define that, if God can't be with evil and evil cannot be around God, yet God is omni everything, isn't that already a defeater for the omni trait?
Well, no, I think you just made my point, actually. God, the whole problem is God is not getting rid of evil. That's the problem. Well, he is. I would say he is in the process of getting rid of evil, and ultimately, eschatologically, all evil will be off the face of the earth, including all the evil humans. In the meantime, God is redeeming millions of them rather than destroying them right now. So it's really a matter of timing. Not is God going to get rid of evil, but why hasn't he already done it? And I think the reason is in his loving kindness and his patience, he's giving time for you to repent, actually, Oz, of your sins, and to put your faith and trust in Christ, and to do that. and that's why he hasn't already destroyed you right now.
Oh, I'd love to have that conversation later.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's my position. Yeah.
There's a
And
ton.
that was your position at one time, right? Just to clarify, you said you're a former Christian, right, or former
Yes,
theist?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Thanks.
We have to get to a mountain of questions and comments. Okay, first one for Daniel. Everything so far that James has said, do you 100% agree with it? Do you find any points of contention?
I mean, like I said, the position that James hold is the position many Christian hold. I'm more on the universalist side of Christianity. The universalist position is we don't really believe that there's a heaven and a hell for bad people, and the good people are going to go to, the good people are going to go to heaven. We kind of believe that Jesus already did all that needed to be done, and it's up to us to kind of take care of each other. So the problem of evil, we see it as broken people that need loving and compassion and charity. Um, in natural evil, we know how to take care of that by just making buildings better, implementing code, safety regulations, banning 18-year-olds from having weapons of war, kind of sensible, logical things. We don't need these extra ideas to solve the problems. We know what to do. We already know what to do. So that's the position of the universalist side of Christianity. Like it's all been done. We just need to get up and do what need to be done and love God and love our neighbors. That's our position.
The next question, I'm going to get to one on this chart here, if you guys can see it. You put under the worst reason to basically not be an atheist, worst reason to be an atheist, the worst reason to not believe. You put critical thinking. Now, that makes sense to me, and I get it, and I
Right.
kind of, I agree with it, but I don't think for the reason that you meant to put it on here. Can you explain it?
Right. The reason I put so the reason that I put the worst reason not to believe, because people assume to be a theist mean you lack critical thinking, right? So that's why I put that in there, because I feel like there's a people assume like to be a believer in a God or in any form of religion mean you lack critical thinking, which actually is the opposite. It's willing to expand your mode of thinking to include, you know, things you yourself know you cannot understand, because we lack the sensory perceptions, we lack the cognitive ability, we lack the lifespan to understand. It will be a really really naive position to assume you as a person could understand the totality of the universe, the cosmos. How dare you think you know what's going to happen before you were here and after you gone? That is a very hubris mode of thinking, to think an individual that was born of a person who at most will live for 100 some years, maybe, that you understand, the totality of the universe, what made this reality and could not make this reality. To me, that's a very hubris position, right? So to be, again, to me, a theist is allowing the possibility of, for those unknown, right, that we don't have the hubris to think that we can know all of it, to then have the position to say there is no God. The evidence is not strong enough to believe in a God.
If I may, and I agree with you to an extent, to where I do not afford or say or claim that any theist is not a critical thinker. I think that is it's not charitable. And I certainly don't believe, because I, of course, was a Baptist Christian prior to becoming an atheist, or deconverting, I should say. I certainly don't feel that I lacked critical thinking. I made the excuse that both science and religion meld together. I still believe that the universe is as old as what science claims for it to be, and such that. So I was never a younger creationist or anything of that sort. I just thought all that melded together. Now, to your point as to none of us can ever know what happened in our past life, or not past life, I should say, before we were born and after I agree with that. I have no idea what's going to happen after, but I do not attribute it being something grounded into a God when that's just a claim and there's no hard evidence to prove that some all-knowing being, or however you want to describe your God, created it all. Now we have science and physics that explains or gives us more evidence towards explaining the start of our universe. It does not give us a fine proof. It gives us more evidence to discover how it happened and how maybe it would all end. But it does not afford us any proof or a surety of how everything started or how everything will end or where we go.
My counter to that, the scientific claims, even there are some scientists actively investigating there's something called the simulation hypothesis. Are you guys familiar with the simulation hypothesis? It
I've heard
has
of it.
multi
Could you
versions,
say again?
but it's
Could you
one
say
of
again?
Simulation
the
hypothesis.
simulation
Okay.
hypothesis.
Yeah. Okay.
The simulation hypothesis, right? There's multiple versions. One very quick summary of it is the idea that we're living in a video game, right?
Mhm.
And then we're living in a video game someone has created, right? So if you follow the scientific thinking on that we're living in a video game, that means someone else created that video game, right? Just from the scientific perspective, there is a creator in the sense of a video game maker, right? And we are the avatar, the agent in such game, right? Just to follow the scientific. Even the scientists are not eliminating the idea that there may be a creator in whatever mode or form of you they claim it is, right? But then to say theists don't have ground to believe in a creator, when now the scientists themselves are modifying their position to make it a small possibility, right?
Sure,
To
it's
me,
it's
that kind of semi-prove the theist position, not undergrounding that what they believe is is grounded in epistemology, or the evidence is ironclad in the sense that their thinking is not illogical.
okay, but I don't necessarily feel that it proves your position more. Science will allow for any possibility. Just because it allows for there to be some kind of creator, sure, but that does not prove that there was one. It is allowing the possibility because we just ultimately do not know. What we have been striving to do in science, and I'm not a scientist, again, like I stated, I'm a nurse, so I don't know all of the scientific theories or proofs, or not proofs, I should say, or evidences that are out there. But more evidence has shown through observable means, through physics, through however science or scientists utilize their means of discovering the start of our universe, has leaned more onto not there being a creator. It has leaned more towards that trend, not it has leaned away towards that trend, I should say, not towards the proof of a God or any creator. I'm not ultimately eliminating God. I have no idea if a God exists. I have no evidence to prove of any God existing.
I have a question, if I could. Is it
It's
okay,
not
Jim,
really a
if we
matter
ask
of
questions
proof.
of each other?
Yeah, it's a matter of argument, right? Because you're right. The scientific consensus used to be maybe 100 years ago that the argument for a god was weaker. But now, as they're presenting the simulation hypothesis, the multi-world hypothesis, the fine tuning, and there's other variables that there are other constant in the universe who would not be if there was some sort of creation. Forget the whole creator aspect of it, where we seem to be here. The universe seem to have had us in mind. Let me put it that way, right? Where again, the reason I put that statement, that the reason not to believe is thinking that if you're a theist, then you lack critical thinking. I know people who kind of, they contemplate believing, but they don't want their friend to think they are not critical thinkers, right? Because like I said, I'm an electrical engineer. I work with a lot of engineers where you could see they lean theists, but they kind of don't want to claim it as a position because they don't want people to think they're not critical thinkers.
Yeah, I had a question, if I could. First of all, I definitely agree with Daniel. I think probably all of us hopefully all of us in the chat here too would agree that we could all benefit from some additional epistemic humility. And I think that's one of the lessons I've learned in the last 5 years of being at the Atheist and Christian Book Club. When we were in our own echo chambers, I know I speak a lot in churches and Christian colleges, universities around the country. And when I'm in a church, all my ideas sound brilliant. Everybody tells me, yeah, you're right. But when I'm in the Atheist and Christian Book Club, it has a way of giving you a little more epistemic humility that maybe all your ideas are not as good as you think they are. So, but my question was for Jena, if I could, is it okay, Jim, if we ask questions of each other? Is that all right? I don't know if he's listening. Okay, yeah, all right. So, you said that maybe the best of the reasons to believe is metaphysical explanations. I was curious about that. What did you mean about that, Jena? That sounds interesting.
I was putting myself in the mind of an actual believer. So I was trying to afford an answer, I guess you could say. So metaphysical explanations, anything that is not of the physical world or natural world that we cannot test or observe for ourselves, metaphysics does not afford us that capability to test something with outside of our realm. A lot of theists will say that, God is of a different universe or a realm. He has no move or touch or placement in our world. So they would say that he's of a different time and space, or however they particularly word it. I'm sorry if I'm not using the proper terms.
No, I think I understand you. That makes sense.
Right. So if something that is untestable in our role, in order for us to strive and prove something that has an effect on us, but you're saying to us that it does not have an effect and it's outside of our time and space, that is a metaphysical explanation. And so I think they strive to use that because we cannot know God's mind. We cannot know what he does, this, that, and the other. So that may be solid for them to use because it puts us at the weak spot where we cannot go against something that is unfalsifiable.
Yeah, I like that, and that I think I understand your point, and I think it's true. One of the difficulties is when you're talking about spiritual things, you are assuming a worldview that says that there's something beyond naturalism, that there's supernaturalism. There's and by that, the demand for the evidence. Show me in your telescope. You have Khrushchev with the first Yuri Giller when he goes up in space. He reported that he went to space. He didn't see God. And so the best telescopes we have, we can't find God. So God must not exist. Well, those are the wrong tools. You're talking about natural things. It's like trying to find a COVID virus using the best telescopes in the world. That's the wrong instrument for it. So the challenge, though, is what would be an appropriate tool to be able to test supernatural claims. And if it's not going to be a telescope or microscope, well, then what would be that tool? And even with historical truth, you have a little bit of a similar problem. Historical truth can't be verified. Is not observable in most cases. It's certainly not. You can't duplicate it in a controlled environment. It's not quite the same as scientific truth, but we do have at least some metrics and some ways that we can try to quantify historical claims. Was George Washington the first president of the United States? Well, you can't find out that in a telescope, but there are ways you can verify that. I think for Christians and many theists, besides Christians, that a lot of it is experiential. And while I think that is useful, and I would be very suspicious of any kind of supernatural claim that did not have an experiential element to it, I think that there's limitations to that, and that experience alone is not, like a supernatural feeling or experience. And I'm putting this back on my own experiences as a Mormon. And as a Mormon, I have very strong feelings and even experiences that I interpreted as spiritual experiences that that made me have confidence in the Book of Mormon and Joseph Smith, that upon later evaluation could be tested in other ways. And I ended up losing faith in that, and going even through a period where I began to question, do I believe in anything supernatural at all? And obviously I came down on the side of traditional Christianity on that. But you're right, Jenna. That could be, I can see why you would call that perhaps the best explanation, but also realizing that even that has some questions and limitations that go with it.
If I can jump in here before my ADHD brain loses this thought. So, well, James and Daniel, both, have you guys read the very, very Christian, popular Christian book, The 5 Love Languages?
The 5 what?
Love Languages?
I'm familiar with it. I've not read
yeah.
it.
I've read it. I've read snippet of it.
Okay, so it's very popular, especially in the evangelical charismatic avenue of Christianity. But it's really, to give a brief synopsis, your spouse or significant other or partner may, their way of communicating love might be giving gifts, but their love language, the way they receive love best, is through quality time. There's the 5 different love languages. I've tried to draw this comparison, and it's usually fairly successful. If Yahweh, or the God of the Bible, is love, so that's not just a description, but that is who he is at his core, his character, that is, we'll say his DNA, is that he is love, then I would imagine he has something similar going on within him, that he understands my love language and how I need to be communicated or shown or demonstrated that he does love me, Oz. He does care about me, and he would know exactly how to do that to compel me and convince me to love him back and to want to invest my life and my love and energy and all that into him. I've yet to have that, see that, experience that, feel that, whatever. So then when I ponder those things, then I think about like, we get in conversations like this, and I'll just say right now, I'm probably the least intelligent person on this panel, and I'm probably the least interested in philosophy, things like that. I'm more of a brass tacks, common sense thinker, and let's just get down to it. And when I read the Bible, God shows himself through pillars of fire, meat and bread and fish raining down from heaven or showing up, and like all these crazy things that happen to show that he is real and show that he loves and show that he has compassion. But for some reason in 2022, no matter how hard Christians pray, no matter how much they plead, we don't see pillars of fire. We don't see bread falling down in Africa where there's millions of starving kids. We don't see God coming in and stopping a school shooting. We don't see anything like that. So does that mean that God is not the same yesterday, today, and forever? Or are we just following this thing on a hunch?
Is that directed at James or me?
Whoever.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't care who answer it. I put the scripture that you're quoting about God is love is from 1 John 4:16, and I was gonna quote the actual definition of love in the Bible, which is 1 Corinthians chapter 13 verses 4-8, where it talk about what love is and the biblical definition. Love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, the love does not boast, love does not do anything. The definition of love you are describing, where you want to be loved, right? Why can God love you? Well, why do you need God to love you when you have your partner, right? When someone else can love you, and it clearly tell Christians, love God and love your neighbor, right? If you're expecting love, well, that's for a fellow Christian, your neighbor to love you, right? Where there's some kind of expectation we put on God. To me, again, as a universalist Christians, where we feel like the part of there's a lot of responsibility we can have on ourselves and each other that we are putting on God, right? And a lot of time I don't understand that motivation. I don't need to see God to know God existed. The fact that I'm here, right, in all possible universe where more kids die from miscarriages, right? More people die from miscarriages, but I'm here, right? The fact that I exist to me prove that there is something out there that's more than me because I didn't have to be it, right? Where there are things we ask of God because we need some kind of personal belief, some kind of personal convictions. It's not a matter of force because Jesus is not going to force you to believe him. He welcomes you. He wants you to come to him willingly, right? I don't want to stop proselytizing. It's not a matter of force. We are not robot, right? We are free willing, self-aware, you know, entity agents, right? Who are capable of many things. You do not have, to be a Christian or to love God, right? But if you do, there's a certain mode of being that's required, right? So you expecting God to love you, he may be loving you in ways you probably can't even fathom, right? But it's a matter of expectation, right? What do you expect as God loving you, and what does that look like for you? What does that mean to you? If you expect God to lay in bed with you, to come and sit next to you and hug you when you're feeling bad, I feel sorry for you that you don't have someone in your life to do that for you, right? It's not a matter of God thing. It's a matter of, like, the people around you are not being responsible toward you. They're not loving you as they should.
I think on
Gonna-
a couple of things insight on that. First of all, if I understand what you're saying correctly, on the love languages, is that God, especially being omniscient, would know if he really wanted to show his love to you, that you, in a way you could understand, there would be better ways for him to do that, that you would be able to maybe see miracles, like the manna from heaven, or you mentioned the miracles. Just a couple of things on that. First of all, just real quickly, there's a misconception sometimes that in biblical times there were miracles happening every hour on the hour, and then all of a sudden now there are no miracles happening whatsoever. And I think when you read the Bible, you find that miracles are very rare in the Bible. At least reported miracles are pretty rare in the Bible, and usually centered around a couple of events in the Bible: creation, some of the Elijah and Elisha. You have that, and then you have a situation with the ministry of Jesus in the Gospels, and in the beginning of the church in the book of Acts. If you take away those periods where there were more miracles taking place, miracles are reported miracles are extremely rare. And I do believe that there are miracles taking place today. We had one of our Atheist and Christian book clubs. We talked about modern day miracles, and if you guys want to talk more about that later, we can. That's a little bit off topic, but we had, I think, some fairly well documented miracles discussed, even with audio tape of it taking place. And whether or not that was sufficient evidence or not would be for you to determine. But so it's not like there were tons of miracles in the Bible and none today. I think that's not the case. Nevertheless, you're not getting the kind of evidence you would want to see. You'd want miracles or something like that, if I'm understanding correctly. And then by seeing that, maybe you would be more inclined to believe that there is a God, and that perhaps that God loves you. So I can understand that. The Christian perspective on that is sometimes, again, God is not wanting to force or be put in a situation where you would be required to believe. But I do think that God gives enough evidence where a reasonable person can choose to believe. And often it is, I find, more an issue of volition rather than lack of evidence. I was talking to Matt Dillahunty after a debate that he did at the Bible and Beer Consortium. And I asked him, it was on the resurrection, and he said in there that there was simply not enough evidence, had the event happened, that you would expect to see had a real event happened. And so after I interviewed him and said, well, Matt, had there really been a resurrection, and there had been eyewitnesses who really was important for them to put forth that evidence and that testimony that it really did happen, what type of evidence would you expect to have seen? And he thought about it for a minute, and he basically said, there's no possible evidence that could exist in any way at all, even if it had happened. So a better question to ask perhaps would be about those miracles and God showing his love to you, Oz. If you did have sufficient proof via miracles or some other way, sufficient proof that that Christianity was true, would you then be willing to worship God?
Worship? No. Would I acknowledge the existence and the reality that this God, or I'm sorry, the fact that we now have evidence to substantiate that this God does exist within our reality? Yes, I could do that. But based on the actions, the allowance of the things that we see, not just today, but in our past, even in Bible times, I personally could not align myself with that ruler.
Believing and worshiping is totally different.
I agree. Both of you are absolutely right, and that's the most common answer I get when I ask that question. Jim Hall is one of the exceptions to that rule, but
I'll explain it if you want. If 100% there were no doubt, all doubt were removed, and Yahweh, the God of the Old and New Testament, were to reveal himself, and the debate is completely over, I would drop to my knees and I would start repenting like a bitch.
Why?
Then if everything's true, he has plans for us, and I have to just accept his big plan. That's the most intellectually honest way I can explain it.
Was it self-preservation?
Yeah, probably a huge dose of self-preservation in there. Yeah, you're right.
You know what? That's honest. That's fair. That's fine.
Oh, Jim.
But even with understanding the
atrocities,
understanding the atrocities in the Bible and knowing all of that God willed to have been done and currently,
yeah.
It's just
look at it this way. Let me put my Christian hat on real quick. All this suffering and pain, it's just a blip on the radar. You were dead for the first 13.8 billion years of the universe's existence, and now blip, maybe 80 years, and then after that, another infinite amount of time. You're not going to be alive. So just this tiny little bit, no matter how bad the pain is, if he's got a plan for you, and then all that time afterwards is going to to be awesome.
Oh, my existence.
I'm just putting on my Christian hat. I don't believe what I'm saying right now. You get that? Okay.
No, I get that. My existence is irrelevant. I could care less about what my existence will be now, what it was yesterday, and what it will be in the future. Overall, the harm in which the biblical God has taken upon his creation, as far as the slaying and slavery and everything else, and what continually presently consists to happen with his creation, and having so many multiple religions, let alone denominations within Christianity, and that no one is getting it right. I fail to believe that God has a good hold and control and understanding of what his creation is doing.
Well, I would say for both of you guys, Oz and Jenna, that is the most common answer that I get to the question. So back to why doesn't God show you? Maybe he knows you well enough to know it does no good to show you, and in fact, may even heap more condemnation on you that you really knew, and still you knew without a doubt, and you still chose not to worship him. It's again, it could be an act of mercy. So that's one of the possible explanations for that. But it is a good question, Oz. If God knows us and knows what it would take for us to believe, if he really wanted us to be a believer, couldn't he lay down whatever steps necessary so that we were almost painted into a corner that we would have to believe? And I agree with you. Yes, he could, but maybe in the best possible world, he chooses not to do that.
Right. And I'll wrap my part up on it and follow up and say then if that is the case, James, and again, I disagree, but I will choose to respect the position. But to me, that we're describing a God that either he's incapable of showing me or he doesn't care. He doesn't care enough about Oz to do what he could do. If he's omni everything, he's refusing to do, or he can't do what he could do.
But just to clarify, you've already said that if he did, you still wouldn't follow him.
I wouldn't follow him. It doesn't mean
there you go. There you go. He has. I don't see why he has any motivation to want to show you. You're not going to follow either way. You're the result's the same.
If he loves me, I mean that's the whole.
If he loves you, but you're still not going to follow him. So why would he go through those extra steps for you to know so that you could still reject him?
If you have a kid that disowns you and moves to another part of the country and just hates you, never wants anything to do with you, I think I would still love her, even if she didn't want anything to do with me.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, the issue though
The point
becomes
is,
do you actually try to force that son or daughter to turn back and give the love back to you? If you are omniscient and you know that no matter what you do, that person's going to reject you, I don't know that you are somehow more honorable by jumping through the hoops to do it anyway.
I'm more honorable. I know that sounds narcissistic. I'm more honorable than God because my love is not dependent on reciprocity. It's unrequited.
right.
If I
Well,
give it,
this is the thing. How do we know Oz? How do we know God is not loving you, Oz? I mean, if I mean, I don't want to sound kind of pedestrian a little bit, but if you're being blessed, you're alive, you're still being provided. I'm not trying to say it's God, but how do you know that's not God loving you? So it's a matter of expectation,
There's no
right?
way for me to know.
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Yeah,
So
I think
that's what I'm saying.
Daniel, what
Then
he's
how do you-
saying. Yeah, I think Daniel, what he's saying is he's not denying the possibility of common grace, but what he's saying is what he's lacking is God doing something supernatural or whatever it takes, knowing him inside out and backwards, that God would do something for him to absolutely know for sure that he did exist. And he's, I think, equating that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Oz, that by God not doing that, he's not being loving. Is that right?
Kind of. Let me give you a real life example. Maybe this will help drill it down. And so growing up, there's a little bit of a difference in the kind of the origins of this story, but it builds. You'll see where I'm going with it. So my biological father, growing up, was very abusive, and by the time I hit age to where I could dip out and run, like Jim said, where I disappeared, I went away, and I had nothing to do with that man for years, and all I ever wanted was my dad to tell me that he loved me, that he was proud of me, anything like that, right? And I had already made up my mind, and Jenna knows my motif. I'm not going to go chasing anyone that doesn't want to have a relationship. It has to be a two-way street. And I was like that with my dad. I'm not going to chase after you. If you want this, it's going to be a mutual thing. Well, he finally reached out to me and started opening up and taking ownership for not being there, taking ownership for making mistakes, taking ownership of all those things. And eventually, at 20 something years old, finally, like 100% apologizing and, telling me how proud he was, how far I'd come on my own, busting my own ass, working hard, doing all that. And it wasn't until then, and it took years. And now today at 40 years old, we're best friends. We're the best of friends in the world. But what it took was him choosing to love me and knowing that, okay, I have to do this and I have to go out of my way to show Oz and demonstrate to Oz that I care enough to interject and start to sow, using Christianese, sow into that relationship and invest in that relationship. And then you eventually saw the work and that investment pay off in a very healthy relationship where forgiveness has happened and we don't even speak of the past anymore. It's done. I can't even tell you the last time I thought about it. Now, the reason I use that real life example for me is if my biological father, flesh and bones, if he can do something like that and understand what I needed just here in this reality for us to mend that relationship and for us to be able to love each other again and have a close relationship again, if he can do it for the love of everything that is or is not holy, God should be able to do that.
So I've had a similar experience with my dad, maybe not to that degree. We went through a 10-year period where we spoke twice in 10 years. And like you, the end of the last 5 or 6, 7 years was almost normal, and it was a real blessing. And I have a little bit of an idea of how devastating that can be, having gone through something maybe on a lesser level like that. So, yeah, I don't know if you're meaning by that if God truly loved you, that you would expect an apology or uh, maybe that would be a better way of asking. What would God need to do to show you that? Would it be some kind of miracle? Would have to you'd see a miracle, or he would come and somehow apologize to you, or
Again,
what were you wanting?
another perfect real life answer to that. Very recent. My mom just passed last July 31st. She was a music pastor for 20 something years. She took her own life on July 31st. Was in ICU and on a ventilator for 2-3 weeks. And I, obviously I'm a non-believer, but my entire family are like the batshit crazy Christians. And they're in there, they're praying and slinging oil and praise and worship music going. And I'm like, all right, God, here's your shot, man. Here's your shot. Your book says where two or three are gathered, there you are. And they can ask any of these things in your name and it'll be given to them. I'm watching, bro. I'm all eyes and I'm all ears. Nothing changed. Nothing changed. After 3 weeks, this woman gave her entire life to this God. Who gave her entire life to the ministry. And her physical pain, her physical ailments from disease were so bad she took her own life. I'm sorry. One of these things are not like the other, and 1 + 1 does not equal 2.
I can't imagine the pain of that, and I've never had an experience approaching, what you're talking about right now. So I can't really put myself in your shoes. But I could see, or maybe if I'm hearing you right, had God intervened supernaturally, maybe that would have been a sign to you, or maybe at that point you may have thought there might be a God that may be worth worshiping, but when you didn't see that, that was kind of a verification for you.
I'll say, to keep it short, if given that my mom had zero brain activity, like nothing going on for 2 or 3 weeks that she was in ICU, had all of a sudden brain activity started and she would have got out of that bed, even if she would have been 75% functional, that would have had my damn attention. That would have had my damn attention, James, because that was one of, Jen and I spoke about this here recently. There were times that I was sitting in the waiting room. I'm like, right now is about the time that if this God's real, I want to see that. I want to know that he's real. This is one of the times. If you're there, dude, I need to know you're there. So, but I'll keep it short.
I don't know what Daniel could say to you. I don't have an answer for you. I don't have all I can say is I understand what you're saying, and fortunately have not had anything up to this point in my life that could identify with that, but I certainly would understand how that would have gotten your attention. And I don't know why, God did not choose to do that, but I could understand your response to that. I think I can.
Only thing I can add to your story, Oz, and I'm really sorry you're going through that. I had a similar childhood, and I'm from Haiti, and you know how bad things are over there. And my father was extremely abusive. I still have the emotional, the physical scars, and broken bones. Right? Never apologized. He died of brain aneurysm in 2011. So we never had the closure that well, the sense of relationship that you enjoying with your dad now. And I'm proud of you for doing that, willing to commit on the time with him and doing that. And I'm tearing up a little bit because I know what a boy goes to having that desire to want that fatherly love and approval, and for them to say they're proud of you, and how tough it is when you don't get that, and you try your best. So the I can understand you feeling the need to see a physical God in that moment to kind of comfort you, and especially as your mom was going through it, she was in so much pain that she chose it to take her life. I don't know what to say to kind of console you. It is a difficult thing to go through. My own experience with my conversion, I've told you this before. For the first about a few months before I converted to Christianity, I was I wouldn't say I was an atheist. I was just an asshole. I used to give the Mormon people a hard time. The people that would come to see my mom to read the Bible with her, I used to try to catch them and got your questions and all kind of stupid little things, boys with too much energy and too much time on their hand used to do. And when I got into the military, the army, specifically in basic training, struggling, and I was at a point in my life where I felt hopeless, to the point where I remember what my mom used to tell me when I was a kid, where just open your mouth and pray to God. Just open your mouth and pray. And I prayed, and I had my miracle. And I would not be here if it was not for that miracle. So I do understand you wanting that sense of His presence and something miraculous to happen in your life to convince you. I wish everyone could have that experience that I've had, that convinced me from being a little asshole kid that was, trying to trick moments into terrible, awful position to have them lose their temper, to being someone a few years later who was fasting and praying and being so pious that most of my family did not recognize me. So it is a strange thing to ask for, and I don't, and it is painful to not receive that when you honestly praying and asking for.
I would like to get back to the slides if I could. First, I would just like to make two notes. Oz is outside. He's outdoors. There's no audio dampening, and his audio is better than all the rest of ours put together, which pisses me
Oh
off.
yeah.
The second thing is a little side note. A side note. You see Daniel Ray in the live chat. He works for James Walker. He's a member of the Watchman Fellowship, and I think you and he didn't you. I think you did a response to him and S.J. Thomason about street epistemology way back when.
Well, the video of theirs, I think, was from way back when, but yeah, we just did that last week before something.
Oh gosh, it was recent. Okay. Oh yeah, weird little side note. Okay, so let me get the slides back up. Something I wanted to ask Jenna about. Well, first off, it's the worst reason to not be a believer. The worst reason to not be a believer, and
Mhm.
that was my original choice. You stole it, so I had to think of another one. But I want to know why you think indoctrination is the worst reason to be an atheist.
Because we're not forced into the beliefs that we grow up into. That is given to us by our parents. Our parents, from an early age, raised us into how the best way they see that they can, based on how their parents raised them, and so on and so forth. So, and I think there is some extent and truth to wherever regionally you are born, or whatever demographic you may be, or whatever household you may have been raised into, you attribute yourself to that, whatever your parents, lay upon you. So just as, I mean, that may not always be the case for some, but for most it is. And for me, of course, like my parents were Baptist Christians, I was, of course, raised in the Baptist Christian Church. I was anointed by oil at the age of 3 and baptized twice at the age of, I don't know, 9. No, at the age of 5, and then again at 11, because we changed churches. So I think that is a bad reason. I would consider that one of the bad reasons of becoming an atheist or being an atheist. I think you would need to find, if you can possibly find, other evidences for or against a God belief that would afford you your way of coming away from the indoctrination and just discovering it for yourself.
Does anyone have any follow-ups to that? We got a little over 30 minutes before we have to start wrapping.
The indoctrination argument to me always, I always find that a little confusing. Children are not born knowing anything. They have to learn
Correct.
to talk. They have to learn to walk. They have to learn how to read, how to write. They have to learn the whole social construct we have around them to just function as a human being. I remember when my little nephew was 3 years old, he would not keep his clothes on. We literally putting clothes on was something he had to learn to be okay with, because he just went around naked with his little ding dong, cling, cling, cling. And we had to kind of like, no, you cannot run around butt naked. So in a way, we had to indoctrinate it into a mode of being as a, as a hairless primate, right? that has built social systems and structures to kind of, be functional being with each other. That is a form
Sure.
of indoctrination, right? I mean, to
Sure.
kind of claim that there's no indoctrination of any form, to me, it's kind of like, again, what do you mean when you say indoctrination, right?
Oh no, I
Because
don't.
because
Oh no,
even when
sorry.
you
Continue.
because right, because to me, in any social construct systems you are raised into, in a way you have to be indoctrinated in. You have to, because you born, again, I don't want to use the Darwin, what was his name again, Richard Dawkins
Charles.
argument, the
Mhm.
blank slate, whatever it's called. But you are an empty vessel in a way, and you have to be taught the ways of mankind, right? Which is indoctrination.
Yes, that's precisely what I meant. I wasn't saying you're born into being a Christian or you're born into being an atheist. I don't even, claim that. We're born,
No, I'm
we're
not
just
against
born
what you
and
said.
we're,
I'm just
oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
Then
not
what was
against
the
what you're saying.
clarification to
I'm
me?
saying, yeah, the people who said Christians indoctrinate people, as in sense it's a bad thing. And I'm saying, where is indoctrination not happening? Please show it to me, of any
So
kind.
the pretty much the standard definition of indoctrination, and I'll read it just because I just looked it up. The process of teaching a person or group to accept a set of beliefs uncritically. So you are accepting something, a belief, a teaching. It doesn't have to be religious. You're just accepting a person's belief of something without you yourself critically thinking about that said belief, without you taking the time to analyze what exactly you're teaching me. And if I have the level of capacity and understanding of what you're teaching me, it's just afforded to me just because I just have to abide by it. It was afforded to me as a child to know that we are Christians. This is what Christians do. This is how we go to church, blah, blah, blah. That was given to me by my parents to teach me the way of life through them. And that's fine. And I don't necessarily claim that that is a good reason to be an atheist. What I'm claiming is that, yes, most of us, not all, have been indoctrinated to understand whatever belief system we were raised in. But it's up to us as we mature and grow older and know the world and experience the world and experience and read about other things that are outside of Christianity. That is when you can find better reasons to be an atheist or a non-believer.
Yeah, Jenna, I agree with you on that. There is indoctrination that, if you want to call it that, it's just called raising a child. I mean, you're going to, whether you're atheist or a Buddhist or a Lutheran, you're going to raise them up that way. And just mathematically, it's possible that you are indoctrinated into a correct worldview, whether it's atheist or deist or what have you. But I think what you're saying, and I certainly agree with you, is that that doesn't mean that you want to stay there because you were indoctrinated. Perhaps they indoctrinated you correctly, but the unexamined life is not worth living. And so what we have to do is, just because we're where we are doesn't mean we should stop thinking and just say, oh, coincidentally, we happen to be raised in the right worldview. Well, no, examine your worldview. Hear the best arguments against your worldview. Take them seriously, steelman them, and then see if it holds up over time. And I think hopefully we all agree with you on that, Jenna.
I hear you on that. And it's interesting how you say it's more a right or wrong worldview. I don't believe there is a right or wrong worldview. I believe there is better ways and standards of living than over others. I don't believe there is a right or wrong way of a worldview.
By that, I just meant a worldview that believes there is a God versus a worldview that believes that holds that there is no God. Both of those can't be true. Either one is true and the other's false, or perhaps somehow they're both false, but they can't be both true at the same time. So that's what we need to examine. That's what I was meaning by that.
Right. And both the Christian God and both the Islamic God cannot both be true.
Correct.
And I think there's a key when we're talking specifically about religious indoctrination. I think there's a key word that we're leaving out, and that would be dogma, or the dogmatic beliefs that are instituted in the indoctrination, whether it's Christianity or Islam. Speaking of the Abrahamic religions, and dogma, a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true, so to not be questioned or challenged. And that's the problem with indoctrination in a religious context. Trying, yes, you can be indoctrinated into political views or opinions, or
is it okay to question atheism? Is that
absolutely.
okay? Or
Absolutely.
okay, so it's not a dogma that has to, should we be allowed to question that on the in a university setting, or should that
Absolutely.
be
That's why there's
banned?
so many differences of us.
Yeah,
We're not all the
okay.
same.
Then we all agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and just for the record, and with my ADHD brain, consistency is my favorite word. But one of my favorite things to do on our channel is I'll go, whether it's TikTok or the YouTube channels, Christian channels, and I'll open it up where I call it the Lion's Den, and I just invite all Christians or whatever to come on, and we just have open conversations. And I'm the only atheist in the room, and I just let them ask, get at it, go, whatever tough questions they have. So I'm all about it. I think we should all do that.
It's off topic, Oz, but I somebody was telling me about the Better Conference in Fort Wayne, which it sounded interesting. Could you? I don't want to chase too many rabbits, but could you give us 30 seconds on what that is?
Yep. Better's June 20. Get my radio voice. June 25th and 26th in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So yeah, it's obviously titles Better. Seth Andrews will be there. Dr. Josh Bowen, Shannon Q, Paula Gia, Dave Warnock, Cynthia McDonald, Jenna, myself, the rest of the Tang gang. And it's focused on how do we engage better as atheists? How do we have better conversations? And when is it the right time to be cordial like this? And when are the right times where we need to be a little more assertive and be a little more demanding of evidence? Because a lot of times we just get a bunch of word salad, and it's like, okay, we just talked for an hour and there's still no advancement, there's no progress. So what do we do? Where do we go next? So it's really going to be based around that.
We did not do our due diligence. See that at the top.
It keeps getting pushed to the right. So if I'm sure it's going to be June 22nd? Oh shit. I don't think I can make that. I got to look at my calendar. I was planning on taking a road trip.
25th and 26th.
Okay.
Hey Jim, at some point could we show that little 5-minute video as an example?
Let's do that now. And while I'm setting it up, I want Oz. Well, first off, we'll put this up for a second. I want Oz to tell us under the worst reason to be a believer. I want you to tell us why the watchmaker argument is just a quick synopsis. Why, if you're walking on a beach and you find a pocket watch, why that would be a reason to believe. But if you're in a snowstorm and then you put a snowflake under a microscope and it's just as intricate, what the difference is?
It's still, if I understand the comparison you're drawing, it's still, it's still the same argument, obviously, and it still doesn't.
Well, it supports your argument, right?
Yeah.
Why this is a bad reason to believe, because a naturally occurring thing can be just as intricate, right?
Yeah, correct. And that's what I was saying. It essentially still boils down to the same thing, which just because it is something seems to be beautiful and amazing and vibrant and brilliant doesn't mean therefore there was or is a creator or a deity or a god. There could be several different, even naturalistic explanations, but until we have evidence to support that there is a creator or a creator god or deity, why make that leap? Why cover that gap with a leap straight to a god?
Can I introduce that?
Sure. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, Sean Carroll is an atheist kind of activist, very popular podcaster. He is a world-renowned cosmologist. I've heard him in debate in New Orleans with William Lane Craig. He's brilliant. He has this little 5-minute video I'd like to share on what I thought was maybe the strongest arguments for the existence of God, which is the design arguments, but there's many of them. So I just, for this video, trimming it down to just one, which is the fine-tuning argument. And what I like about Sean, he is an atheist, but he acknowledges that this is probably the best argument that Christians have. And he doesn't caricature it. He steelmans it. He does a very fair job of laying out exactly why it is so compelling. Then he gives a reason to why he doesn't think it's a sufficient argument and leaves it up to his listeners as to whether or not they feel his reasons are adequate or not. So I just like that approach. I wish that Christians would be that careful always about their responses to atheists. And this is certainly a stellar example of how an atheist ought to answer Christian arguments. So this is 5 minutes on the fine-tuning argument from an atheist.
Yeah, two things, James. One, for all of you, this is 4 minutes and 57 seconds. So if you want to go grab a restroom break or a beer or a soda, this would be your time. I will be looking at the live chat. So if you have a question, we'll get to it, I promise. And second, James, am I going to get a copyright strike if I play this whole thing?
When I just posted it earlier today, it passed through YouTube without a copyright.
Oh boy. Okay, here we go. Crossing my fingers.
Hey, Jim.
You don't need God to explain the origin of the universe.
What's up, Oz?
Just because I will forget if I don't mention it to you. When we
Yeah,
come
yeah,
back, when we come back, can we talk about the mental health part on the
Absolutely. Remind me. We'll hit that next. And I also want to talk to James and Daniel about the ontological. And we have probably 20 minutes left before we have to start final thoughts.
I have to step
Okay.
away, so go ahead and continue.
Oh,
without me,
gosh. Okay. James, you
Yeah,
can
it was
handle the
nice to meet you.
ontological on your
Okay.
own. Okay. Thanks so
Oh, yeah.
much for coming, Daniel. And we'll have you back on next time.
No problem. Bye.
Universe. However, it's still possible that God is a better explanation than any of the purely physical, naturalistic ones that I was just talking about. So we should be judging God by the same standards that we judge all the other theories. In my personal opinion, the best argument on the basis of empirics in favor of the existence of God comes from the fine-tuning of physical parameters in our universe. It seems to be true that if you look around in the universe, we characterize what's going on by various numbers, the energy density on average, the expansion rate, physical parameters like the mass of the electron and so forth. It seems to be the case that if you changed many of these numbers by an appreciable amount, things would be very, very different. It is plausibly true that for many of these numbers, if you change them by an appreciable amount, life would not possibly exist. Furthermore, it seems as if some of these physical parameters are not natural. That is to say, if you just picked them from a bag, mass of the electron, energy density of empty space, expansion rate of the universe, you would get very, very different numbers than what we actually observe. So you see where the argument is going. You need certain very specific, the argument says, parameters in the universe for life to exist. These parameters don't seem to be generic. They do not seem to be what you would easily get just by randomly choosing numbers for the universe. And yet they are right there where you need them in order for life to exist. Why were we so fortunate to find ourselves in a universe that seems unnatural, but in a way that is allowing the universe to be hospitable for the existence of life? This is a very natural, sensible place to wonder whether or not there was some designing going on, whether or not God helped the universe along a little bit in picking the appropriate parameters to allow for the existence of life. The best example in my mind is the cosmological constant, the energy density of empty space, the vacuum energy. This is something that we think is not zero. When I was your age, we thought this was zero when I was in graduate school. But in 1998, we found that the universe is accelerating in a way that is exactly compatible with a small but non-zero energy density in empty space. Now, the reason why that's interesting is because you can sit down and ask yourself, if I didn't look at the universe, if I just estimated on the basis of what I know about particle physics and cosmology, what would I guess the value of the vacuum energy should be? My guess is larger than the observed value by a factor of 10 to the 120. That is to say, if it is true that we have a non-zero but small vacuum energy, we did not pick it randomly out of a hat. We think we know what the natural value would be if we did pick it randomly out of a hat. It is very, very, very different than the value we actually observe. So what kind of possibilities might help to explain this apparent fine-tuning of the parameters of nature? Well, one is that we just got lucky. It is not ever completely clear to me that asking this question is a sensible thing to do. Aren't we fortunate that the laws of nature allow us to be here asking how fortunate we are? Nevertheless, I don't find it quite plausible, or at least, as a working scientist, it sounds like a cop-out to me to say, well, we just got lucky. The laws of physics allow for us to be here. Isn't that nice? Let's move on. Another possibility is that the parameters are not nearly as finely tuned as we think when it comes to explaining the existence of life. Maybe for very different values of the parameters, there will be other kinds of life. It is extremely presumptuous, I think, to think that we understand perfectly when life could exist. Maybe life is quite generic. And then the last two more substantive possibilities are maybe what we're seeing is a selection effect. Maybe the parameters of nature are very different from place to place. Maybe most places they are utterly inhospitable to the existence of life. But of course, there's an environmental selection. We are only going to find ourselves in those regions of the universe that are hospitable to us existing. Therefore, we observe these finely tuned parameters. Or someone made it that way. God intervened, made the parameters because God wanted to make a universe where we could exist. What would be the point of a universe without us, after all?
All right. Sorry, guys. All right. What did I promise Oz?
Mental
forgot
health.
already.
Mental
See?
health.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Jim, can you pull that graphic back up, please?
Oh, sure. And start talking about it. It's going to take me a minute to get it.
Okay. So this is actually to the atheists and not the theists. Stop with the mental health bullshit. Stop with the you must be psychotic or insane or delusional or whatever. Stop it. Stop it.
I am guilty. I'm going to be the first to answer that. There was, and guess who called me out? Shannon Q, and good on her for doing it. She called me out because I did allude. I subtly alluded to there might be a connection between, like, I said something about maybe I wonder why religion is not in the DSM-5, which is bad, and I'm ashamed of myself for ever even thinking it. Now that I know that, well, I've met guys like James and Daniel and some really, really smart people that are actually capable of critical thinking in every aspect of their life, but they've partitioned off their brain and they have a tiny little box in the back of their head where they don't apply any form of skepticism. Wow. To that particular topic. Every other thing, Oz is right. It's not a symptom of mental illness at all. That's what you were trying to get at?
Yeah, because it is, for anybody does you pay any attention to Tang, we talk a lot about mental health, and that's something that's very, very important to me and near and dear to myself and my family. And not only is it a slap in the face to the theist to even insinuate that, but it's a slap to the face for those of us that are professionally and medically diagnosed with mental health, mental illness, diseases or effects. And it hurts me for the theist and for myself when I hear that. So please, atheists, drop that shit. It's pathetic.
If I could comment on that, first of all, I'm glad to hear you say that, Oz, because when I looked at the list, I'm wondering, is he going to make the opposite case or something like that? Yeah. I got to wonder that. So I'm glad that you didn't, and certainly that was something that I was pleasantly surprised to hear. By the way, I don't know if you know Anthony Magnavasco, but he's the author of a manual for creating atheists and kind of pretty much the father of street epistemology, and he does make a case that Christianity or theism. Peter Boghossian. I'm sorry, Peter
Yeah.
Boghossian, not Peter Boghossian. It may have been, I'm sorry, Peter Boghossian, I think, was the one who made the case that Christianity ought to be, or at least theism. I don't know if he mentioned Christianity specifically, but theism should be added to the DSM as a mental illness. But it had somehow been grandfathered in with some type of exception that should be reconsidered at this point. So I'm glad to hear you don't agree with that, and that's an example of I think a step in the right direction of being able to have substantive conversations about something that's very important to both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it's very lazy thinking to insinuate that.
Okay, we've got probably 15 plus minutes. I want to jump on this ontological real quick. I'm going to put the slide back up. James, I think it is, where's the the worst reason to be a believer. Tell us why the ontology briefly explain to a dumb, explain it so a dumb marine can understand what the ontological argument is first, and then tell me why you think it's the worst argument to believe in God.
I don't know that that's possible. This is my problem with it. Let me just say, first of all, I listed it as the worst reason to believe in God, the ontological argument. It actually might be the best reason, but try as I will, I can't understand it. And sometimes I think I get real close to understanding it, then I have a good night's sleep, and the next day I'm just as far away as I ever was. But the ontological argument was given to us by Anselm of Canterbury, 11th century Christian philosopher, theologian, and it basically goes like this. It is true by definition, that God is a being that which none greater can be imagined. Okay, I can accept that. Premise two, God exists as an idea in the mind. Well, I think even atheists can agree that God can exist in the mind, so I'll agree with that one. Number three, a being that exists as an idea in the mind is in reality is greater than a being that exists only in the mind. Okay. If it's only in the mind, a being that actually existed would be greater. Okay, I can check off number three. Number four, premise four, if God exists only as an idea in the mind, then we can imagine something that is greater than God. Okay, if God is only in my mind, then we can certainly imagine a being that is greater, that exists in reality as well as in the mind. 5, but we cannot imagine something that is greater than God. Again, by definition. 6, therefore God exists. Whew, what? Okay, now let me say that there are philosophers that are infinitely smarter than me, and some of them have told me, James, this is the most powerful argument for the existence of God. And I have sat through workshops on this. The philosopher Alvin Plantinga has a variation of this, which is very sophisticated. And again, sometimes I think I do get it, and then no. It seems like to me that you're trying to define God into existence by just setting up definitional parameters, and then that means that God exists. And why couldn't you do this with the ultimate rainbow unicorn or something? And so now again, those people who are smarter than me say, well, it won't work with anything but an ultimate being for X, Y, and Z reasons. And what they say, I agree with it. Then they leave, and I come, wait a minute, I don't agree with that. Wait a minute. And so anyway, I'm not saying that it's a bad argument. I will say that it's a bad argument to convince me. And I will acknowledge right off the bat, I probably don't understand it, and I will take all the blame for that. It is one of the classic arguments for the existence of God. All the rest of them make sense to me, at least on some level. This one doesn't.
That one is weird. It almost sounds like we think, therefore he is. Like it's a weird.
Yeah, there you go.
And I've heard that kind of argument before. And I'm now that I'm thinking about it, I believe this particular individual is trying to use their own spin on the ontological argument when they kept posing the question, well, can you think of God? And I'm like, yes. Well, can you think God in reality? I'm like, yes, I can think of God, and in my reality, I can think God is, or whatever, however I phrased it. And then he was immediately saying, well, God is real. Like, just because I have thoughts of a God doesn't imply that it's real. I can have thoughts of the Little Mermaid,
Purple
and I think that
unicorns, yeah.
mermaids are real. Yeah,
Yeah.
but that's not the case.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
it's in my reality. I am actively thinking about mermaids, but that doesn't mean mermaids are real.
Now, we may have 2 or 3 Christian listeners in here. I don't know. It seems like 99.9% the text that's scrolling by of obvious atheists by the comments. But maybe if there is an atheist who can straighten me out a Christian who can straighten me out real quickly, and I will write up and agree. I obviously don't understand what I'm critiquing here. So if I'm wrong, I would certainly love to be corrected.
Let's get back to the slide. Oh yeah, you're right, James. Of course, it goes without saying it's mostly atheists, but you'd be surprised the percentage of believers that watch I don't know if they're hate watching or
Daniel Ray
just
is here.
they like
I
the
think he's a
format.
Christian.
Yeah, they appreciate the format because
Yes.
as far as atheist channels go, I would say we maybe next to Hemet Meta or Anthony, we might be the most non-confrontational. So I don't know.
The God Talk is here and is coming across as Christian, very, very talkative.
I think they reference them being Otangelo.
I was about to say there's a conspicuous absence of Otangelo Grasso now, but yeah. Oh, Otangelo was in here. Okay. Is there anything on this list? I'm not saying we're wrapping up just yet, but is there anything you wanted to talk about on this slide that we had not yet?
I would say for myself, as far as worst reason to believe, moral arguments and anecdotes, proclamations of personal happenings to one's own life. Oh, God allowed me not to die, but said other person died, things like that, or anecdotes that we cannot test. Like, okay, I will digress and say that there are certain things science cannot explain yet. And that doesn't mean that we necessarily afford that gap with a God claim, because there's even less explanation of there being a God that intervenes or intercedes in anything that we can explain better with theories and hypothesis. And it's not absolute proof, but it is evidence leaning more towards that. But more to the point, moral arguments as far as what is in God's good nature. If it was in God's good nature to have slaves, even if it just label it as indentured servitude, I would definitely say that I am a lot better than God. And I think that is the worst moral argument that anyone can claim, as that being of God's goodwill. Therefore, you should believe in worship said person or God.
I've always kind of interpreted anecdotes as stories that don't have any data to back them up necessarily. So you have anecdotal evidence that my aunt took this miracle cure, and sure enough, she feels better the next day or something. So, well, that's anecdotal evidence. There's no double-blind study. There's no placebo effect accounted for. It's not funded by a university or a government study. It's anecdotal. It's an interesting story, but it kind of proves nothing. That certainly would be among the worst reasons to believe stories that aren't backed up with fact.
Agreed. And I know Daniel's not here to defend his position, but I'm going to highlight it anyway. But and he had on a best reason, building community bonds. First of all, don't even get me started. And history, I don't know what he's implying by history, but that's where I'd love to have Dr. Yashua Bowen to come on, and we can dig into history. That's a terrible reason. That's a terrible reason to believe.
Ooh.
I was going to ask him that myself. I would like to hear his explanation.
What is that under his what best reason?
Best reason to believe.
Okay, yes.
Because that says nothing to the truth claims.
That's it.
Yeah, it's like building community, build bridges, and maintain a history. Like community building. But I don't see that answering truth claims at all. So I don't know why he's put it in there.
Yeah.
No,
No,
does he mean? I wonder if he means by history that there's a historicity to the claims of the Gospels or something like that. Now, it seems like it's totally different than community bonds and building, and that is an interesting question. I used to be a guest at the Metroplex Atheist Wednesday night fellowship, and that question came up numerous times. Do things like community building within the Christian tradition, is that a valuable thing that ought to be encouraged, whether or not Christianity is true? In other words, it's a great place to bear each other's burdens and develop relationships, friendships. And in fact, maybe to some degree, the Metroplex Fellowship is modeled after that, maybe on some level. Certainly the North Texas Church of Free Thought was an attempt to take some of those Christian concepts and bring them into the atheist community. And now, Jim, you were in some of those conversations. You can clarify that, but I kind of got both answers back, depending on which atheist you talk to. Some atheists were saying, well, yeah, it's a great thing to have community, and churches do a lot of wonderful things and build hospitals, and then, God may not be true, but they do some great things that ought to be encouraged. And other atheists were saying, no, it's a tremendous waste of money. And they do more harm than good.
Yeah, I think it's positive. The last 3 times I've been asked to speak publicly is at a church, at a UU church, Universalist Unitarian Church, where it's a lot of non-believers too. At least 40 to 60% of every congregation I speak at is non-believers, but there's believers there too. There's weird woo-woo crystal rubbing pagans. There's everything, right? But they still ask me to speak, and that's an outlet too. If you just don't want to go to like Metroplex Atheists, we're hardcore activists, right? We protest, we put up there's no God banners. If that's not for you, even though it's got a social aspect to it too, if you just want that community building, there's the UU churches, and there's family type gathering, Fellowship of Free Thought in Dallas. I'm sure every major city's got one, but they concentrate on family building for non-believers. They promote Camp Quest. It's a summer camp, for a secular summer camp. They do family events.
Your kids went there, didn't they?
Yeah, my daughter just this is her 9th year. She started out as just a camper, and then she was a Phoenix, and then a counselor in training. Now she's a full-on counselor, 24 years old. She runs a cabin. It's awesome. That's how I met Drew McCoy, genetically modified skeptic. That's how I met Anthony Magnabosco. That's how I think that's the first time I ever met Matt Dillon. He did a magic show there once. No, it's called Secular Rarity. It's called Camp Quest. And I know Texas. I know there's one in Oklahoma also. I think there's one in New Mexico. There might be all over the place. Anyway, back to this. Okay, we got about 5 minutes. Let's hit these slides again. Is there anything we wanted to, any final thoughts on these slides?
If I could say one more thing about the building community part. So, kind of hit at the atheist a minute ago. One thing I would, and again, in this conversation is demonstrating that it's not all. So I want to be specific that I'm not over generalizing. But if I could say to theists, and not just Christians, but theists as a whole, when someone is compelled to, or for whatever reason, shifts away, walks away, deconstructs, deconverts, whatever we want to call that, the worst thing you can do, and not only did I experience this, but almost every single atheist that I know and that I get to talk to that has went through this process has been abandoned by family, friends, pastors, youth pastors, whatever it is. And even if they never return to the quote unquote fold, what that says is you never really cared about the human. Okay, that's because our perceptions are reality, right? What it says is you never cared about the person. You never cared about the human. You cared about either the number in the seat or the dollar in the offering plate, or maybe it was a friendship of convenience, or maybe it's like someone like myself where I played drums and I oversaw the small groups and everything. Like it was good. I was good for that. But as soon as I didn't believe what you believed anymore, all of a sudden we can't be friends. We can't have a relationship. We can't hang out and not have to talk about church and God and make it complicated or weird. We can't just still be friends. That would be my biggest challenge, and that is don't abandon people. Don't just leave them hanging, because it is more often than not, it's like going through a train wreck and a divorce all at the same time, and it sucks, man, and it's very, very hurtful. And I don't think a lot of Christians, not all, a lot of Christians specifically pay that much mind to that part of the deconstruction, deconversion, and it does cause I would say more bitterness, more of that angst, more of that anger, because it's like, oh, I thought we were friends, or I thought we were family, and you told me we were community, and now just because we don't agree on one thing, you're going to cut me off, abandon me, and then not even answer my phone calls anymore. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. We were never friends.
Well, I apologize on behalf of the Christians that disagree with that way of handling issues like that you went through. Jesus set the standard. Unfortunately, none of us live up to that standard, but we should try to. And that is that when you lose the sheep, you leave the 99 and you go after the one. And that's the true shepherd's heart. And anything less than that, I could see how it could be interpreted as, and maybe it really is, not exhibiting the love that ought to be there. Hey, did we have time, Jim, for me to talk a little bit about the extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence?
Let me pull that up. We got about 5 more minutes before plugs and final thoughts.
I've got more than 5 minutes worth, but maybe I can just hit a few highlights. That's really, I debated whether to put this down because it's really not a reason. It's more of like a truism or an axiom, but I hear it regularly. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. There's few real quick thoughts on that. It depends kind of on what you mean by that, because on the overall level, it's just logically problematic. Even if there was zero evidence, it doesn't mean that an extraordinary event didn't happen. Okay. Absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So something can happen miraculous that there's no evidence of and nobody even knows about, but nevertheless, it either did or didn't happen. So you don't have to have evidence for it to have happened. Now, if you mean by that, in order to convince me that it's true, I need to have extraordinary evidence. One of the problems is that's not scientific. It's not extraordinary is not a quantity. It's not measurable. It's an adjective. So extraordinary, by what definition of extraordinary? So the examples that I've been given is, I think this comes from Carl Sagan. If you had a dragon in your garage or something like that, if I claim that to be true, then I would need to have, if I say I have a car in my garage, I need ordinary evidence. But if I have a green dragon in my garage, I need extraordinary evidence. And that works real well, that analogy, if you are dealing with things that we know absolutely are not true. But when you apply that same metric to other extraordinary claims, like the claim that men actually landed and walked on the moon, that's an extraordinary claim that even with modern advancements, we've been either unwilling or unable to duplicate in over 30 years now. Is it going on 50 years now? 50 years. So nevertheless, there are people that are believing that the moonwalks never happened. And they're saying the very same thing. I need extraordinary evidence. And what I'm finding is whatever evidence you give them, they say that's not extraordinary. Photographs, not extraordinary. Photoshopped, it was done in a soundstage. I mean, whatever you give them is not extraordinary enough to match the extraordinary claim.
Oh, you're saying the evidence is purely subjective to that individual. So extraordinary, it's
the
person to
syllogism.
person.
Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. What is extraordinary? I don't know, but whatever you got ain't it. So that's what you're up against. No matter what evidence I present is not sufficient to them. And because it's not a metric, it's not a measuring device. It's an adjective. Adjectives are not scientific. It's in the mind of the beholder, So I think I've got extraordinary evidence for a moon landing. And they go, What you got? Give me more. I'm not convinced.
I get it. I don't agree with it, but I get it.
I-
If it weren't that science is, well, testable, verifiable, falsifiable, peer reviewed, it's objective. It's not, science doesn't deal in extraordinaries.
The adjective,
It's either evidence that's
what is
supported by facts
extraordinary?
or, yeah.
Okay, we did a
Well-
book club on miracles, and I wanted to give a miracle that at least had some evidence to it. So I have a miracle that was actually caught on tape. A man's voice was miraculously healed in mid-sentence. You can hear before and after. Over 100 doctors had told him he would never speak again. I'm playing the tape, and I bring the guy into our Atheist and Christian book club, so he's there to answer questions. He talks about the lead doctor, who's agnostic, talking about that he has the photographs of the scar tissue before and after. And he says, I can explain that maybe somehow all the nerve tissue regenerated. There may be a natural explanation. What I can't explain, the doctor said, is where'd the scar tissue go? Scar tissue, by its very definition, it doesn't go away. And so you have before and after photographs of that. Now, what I hear, the pushback I hear is, well, that's not even ordinary evidence. I need extraordinary evidence. And so, yeah, I don't know. You need video to go with the audio. I don't know what again, whatever I've got is not going to be sufficient. And that's the problem with the axiom. Extraordinary is in the mind of the beholder. One final problem with it. If I do have extraordinary evidence, and I claim to have extraordinary evidence, that itself is an extraordinary claim, which is also going to require extraordinary evidence to go with that. So it ever repeats itself over and over again. You can never arrive. No one can ever satisfy. Even if you believe the lunar landings really happened, you'll never have enough evidence to convince the skeptic.
Well, sorry, go Jim.
I would say what you demonstrated was not a miracle claim. It was a medical claim. And of course, by all means, Dr. Ben, you are more advanced in this than I am. I'm just simply a nurse. Not just simply, but I am a nurse. So I don't know as much as a doctor would, but I can state that scar tissue does, as Dr. Ben states, it does go away under certain circumstances. And you had prefaced that he, in a sense, referencing that this individual did at one point speak before. Now, with medicine, not as much education as you can possibly get with as being the most profound doctor that knows almost everything. Not every doctor knows everything, and not every doctor can explain even the most rare of diseases or circumstances or occurrences that goes on with the human body, because things happen. The body
There are
heals
anomalies.
and changes. Yes, there are anomalies. To specify that as a miracle, that all of a sudden now he speaks, what is the measure of and level of that person speaking? There are ways in which the body does heal that is separate from every individual. And to medically explain that or claim that there is a miracle that applied to that person speaking again is dishonest.
Well, I mean, it was, I guess it depends on how you use the word miraculous. It was certainly amazing. I guess you could at least say that, because it's mid-sentence. It's as he's reading the Bible verse. It's either a great fake, or it defies definition. So again, you can listen to the tape yourself and see, but to catch in mid-sentence before and after, when numerous teams of doctors had told him that he would never be able to speak clearly again. Anyway, to me, it was amazing. And maybe it's not a miracle, but to have it caught on tape is certainly, I would say, would raise to the level of extraordinary, because it's very rare for miracles to happen by definition. If they happened every day, they wouldn't be a miracle. Yeah. And so to actually have a tape running at the time, not anticipating it was going to happen, was again, the timing was, I guess I'll use the word amazing rather than miraculous.
And I would say to that, and I'll let everyone else speak, is that the way in which you can designate what is an extraordinary claim is that I can claim that I have a red Tesla in my garage right now, that Tesla only binds to me, my own personal way of getting around, whether or not I pay for gas. Obviously, I don't because of the electric car, but that has no bearing on your life. That the fact that I have a red Tesla. I can make an extraordinary claim that I have a red Tesla in my garage right now. An extraordinary claim that would have a bearing on everyone's life on this earth and beyond if there is an existence of other life in the universe, which there could be a possibility that there is. A God claim is extraordinary or considered an extraordinary claim because it has bearings and possibilities of control or non-control, because obviously your belief is that there's free will. I do not believe there is free will. That has
Do you
bearing on
freely
every
believe that?
individual's. Excuse me?
Do you freely believe that of your own volition?
I don't know.
Okay. That was just a joke. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. That God claim has a bearing on every person, living thing on this earth and beyond. The fact that I have a red Tesla in my garage, whether I do or not, doesn't. So the fact that you can make a claim that something exists that has control on your life, whether or not you have free will, that dictates who to love, who to sleep with, who to marry, who to abide by such and such doctrine, how to have sex if not outside of procreation, that has bearing on everyone's life.
I think I
so
understand
to
what
make
you're
a claim
saying.
that there is a God, you need to identify and provide hard evidence that if this God is real and I'm supposed to abide by this, you need to show me that, because
Okay,
that
so what you're
definitely
saying,
is something
what you're saying, if I
extraordinary.
understand correctly, is extraordinary to you applies to more than just the fact that it's a somewhat miraculous or very miraculous. You say there's another component to it, if I'm understanding correctly, and that is the implications of the claim. Because if that claim is true, it has lifestyle implications, it has truth claim implications. So extraordinary doesn't mean it was just miraculous or very miraculous or not miraculous. Extraordinary to you is the implications that would go along
Heavy
with that claim.
implications.
Got you. Okay,
Yes.
I got that. Yes.
Guys, hate to jump to cut in. I like to start and stop at hard start, hard stop. We're going to start with Oz because he has a loose round to one more thing to get out. So final thoughts and your plugs, Oz.
Yeah, just real quick. One, I have actually probably in the last like 6 months or so, kind of backed off the extraordinary claims, extraordinary evidence thing, because to me, I've just boiled it down. I just want evidence. I just want evidence. I just want good. I want good, reliable evidence. It doesn't need to be out of this world extraordinary. I just want good evidence. So as soon as we get that, maybe we could talk about something else. But I can't. I haven't even got there yet. But then, real quick, James, first, when you say tape recordings, was it? I want to be clear. Was it like a cassette tape? Was it a phone recording it?
I think it was a audio cassette tape. It actually took place in the early '90s, and so I brought the guy back on that experienced it to explain and answer questions into our Atheist and Christian book club.
Okay, so just a little background of mine for you. So I've, my mom was a music pastor for, like I said earlier, for my entire life almost, and I've spent years in recording studios, done sound engineering, mixing, and I can tell you that the reliability of any cassette tape, whether it's the standard or the smaller compact cassette sizes, the rate in which the tape within the cassette can stretch and move and compromise the quality or the pitch or the tone of said voices being recorded is all over the map. So that's one of those things where it comes to evidence. Yeah, we would need something that might be a good clue in and a good step in, but that would not be, for me, convincible that there was.
And any audio can be manipulated digitally.
Absolutely. I do it all the time. I know.
James, final.
Please make me sound better, Jim.
We've got 2 minutes. James, final thoughts and plugs.
I just wanted to say, if those that are watching are interested in Christians and atheists having respectful dialogue about important issues, you might want to check out atheistchristianbookclub.com. monthly gathering of believers and skeptics. And we alternate. We'll do a Christian book one month, atheist book next month. We bring in to the book club, either in person at our offices or either at the by Zoom or what have you. We bring in the authors. So we've had some of the top authors, New York Times bestsellers, that are part of the book club answering your questions. We've had Lawrence Krauss, the author of A Universe from Nothing, Graham Oppy, probably one of the preeminent atheist philosophers out of Australia, one of the preeminent atheist philosophers alive today. We brought in Gary Habermas of Liberty University from Christian perspective. We brought in who are some of the others we've had, Jim?
Frank Turek, Bart Ehrman.
Bart Ehrman, who's one of the agnostic, who's probably one of the leading critics on the New Testament text, textual critics. And so they're there, they're down to earth. They listen to the questions. Now, a lot of people just like to lurk. They'll come in, they won't even turn their camera on. They just want to listen to it. But we encourage you to be willing to ask questions. You just type in that you want to ask a question and we'll call you up, ask you to unmute your mic. And you're talking with a New York Times bestselling author, whether Christian or atheist, about their book, and you're able to ask your questions. So all we ask it is respectful. I don't know if some of what I'm seeing scrolling by in the text would qualify for that, but maybe you could be on your best behavior if you come to the Atheist and Christian Book Club and ask your question in a respectful manner. We would certainly love to entertain that. And again, I think I have had the dubious privilege of hearing, I think, some of the best evidences that there is no God for 5 years now. And while I'm still a believer, I do think that I've been challenged. I have moderated my position on some things. And I think overall, I hope at least overall, it's made me a better thinker. And I think that's a goal that we all might share.
Jena, last word. We're over time.
Yes. I'll just, since me and Oz work together, happen to stop by if you're not already subscribed, the Atheist Network group, that's where we are, where we host our shows, have discussions about mental health, have discussions about atheism, and review apologetics. So that's what we often do. You can find me on Twitter at Jena_BFA, and you can find Oz under the at Tang is Live. And just, keep in mind for our Better Conference, June 25th and 26th, is just going to www.jesusismyth.com.
Again, you see that banner coming up. Everything they just plugged is in the description section, I believe. If it's not, you guys hit me up afterwards. I'll throw it in there. Some pretty cool. A lot of positive feedback in the live chat on this format and the topics. So I want to emulate that. At one point, we got real close to 40 concurrent viewers in the live chat, which is the third most this channel has ever had, next to a couple outliers when Aaron Ra was on once in person and Richard Carrier. So it's a hit. We're going to keep this going. I'm going to, you guys, if you're up for it, I want to have you back again very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. We're over time. Talk to you later.